Hey there, friends and enemies. Jopa here again, and welcome to the Weekly Lootdrop, my podcast about all your favorite looter games from Destiny to Diablo and everything in between. And we've officially arrived at the calm before the storm. There are so many things to be excited about on the horizon. A new Destiny season, Diablo 4 dropping, some games coming out potentially by the end of the year. I'm going to touch on all of that, but I am so excited. This is going to be a banner year in the looter space. From now until this time next year is probably going to be absolutely insane if I had to guess. And the reason for that is simple. There is a Diablo 4 coming out in just a couple weeks, which looks to be a massive game, not only from a gameplay standpoint, but a popularity standpoint as well. If the betas are anything to kind of go on, we've got the final shape in Destiny, the final expansion of the Light versus Dark saga, and the year leading into that, which is very exciting as well. We've got looter games dropping from Arc Raiders to the First Descendant to Sync, some of which may end up popping off. We've got a new game mode in the Division 2 called Descent that looks like it could be very good. There's just a lot going on, and I'm very excited about it. I cannot wait. And the video game space in general is in a healthy spot right now. Outside of potentially first person shooter and PvP games, everything else is absolutely thriving. So, this episode, I'm going to go over Diablo 4, things we learned from the Server Slam, Destiny 2 as we approach Season of the Deep, which looks very, very interesting, and then speculation about the looters that are coming out later this year, when I can kind of see them dropping and why I'm excited about them in and of their own right. So, first and foremost, we had the recent Diablo 4 beta called the Server Slam. This one was a little bit interesting because of a couple reasons. The main talking point from the weekend was the nerfs to the Necromancer. The skeletons that you summon felt very, very weak, and a lot of people were really frustrated about it, especially Necromancer mains. Now, for me personally, I think the nerfs were a little too heavy, and they did end up rebuffing him a little bit, so I think that's fine. You want the game to be fun, but you don't want it to be necessarily a cakewalk through all of the different types of content, because it kind of makes endgame a little trivial and farming for gear not really worth it. So the balance between having these awesome builds and things being too bullet spongy, which obviously doesn't apply in Diablo as far as like bullets, but too tanky necessarily. That's the balance that they're trying to find, because you can increase the health of a lot of enemies, but that doesn't necessarily make the game harder. It just sometimes makes it more tedious. Whereas you also have things like your nerfs that you could see, like we saw with the Necromancer and the Sorcerer, but you kind of have to balance that, because if you nerf a class too much, it's almost unplayable and it just doesn't make it fun. And fun at the end of the day is what we want to see in a game like Diablo. I want awesome builds where I can destroy a bunch of enemies all at once and mow through different content. Then I get to end game and my builds are taking on bosses, world bosses, strongholds, all that kind of good stuff. And that's really where Blizzard has to find the sweet spot. Now, one of the main issues we have going forward is the classes feel so imbalanced. Some of them feel so much stronger than the others. And a lot of that is not necessarily down to how the classes play, but the gameplay loop itself. So, for example, the Barbarian and the Druid suffer as melee classes because against the world boss, there's times where you're just getting one shot, no matter how strong, tanky, or your ability to heal is. It doesn't matter. You're getting one shot if you're too close. So the timing, the defensive abilities, timing the attacks has to be way more sound on your melee characters. Whereas on your sorcerer, rogue, or necromancer, you can kind of hang back and let everything else do the work while you're not really in any danger all the time. You can survive a lot longer. So that's really where the gameplay loop, there's a lot of things on the ground like pools of acid and that kind of thing that do damage over time that make it hard for barbarians and melee classes to really succeed. And that's one thing I don't know how they're going to fix, because you can buff the barbarian, and I guess as long as you buff it to where you promote the class being just in combat all the time, it can succeed. But it's just the gameplay loop I don't think is really meant to be catering towards those classes. whereas the range classes are just always going to be easier. You have something like the sorcerer, who is a glass cannon. You got to find ways to put the sorcerer in danger without them just nuking everything, and that's going to be the hard part going forward. That being said, I love the sorcerer, so if it's OP, I don't really care. I'm going to be playing that first and foremost. That's going to be my first character for sure. I think Necromancer looks very interesting. As long as they kind of buff it a little bit and make it absolutely viable, I think Druid is going to be my second character. It does look like it's potentially going to be a lot of fun. You just have to have it be successful and survive early game. They've talked a lot about how late game, barbarian, druid, those kind of classes are going to really excel at that point, but I don't want it to be a slog getting there, and that's really the hard part. The server slam, the other thing that was really interesting is that the servers actually held up really well. There was not a lot of issues, especially compared to the previous betas, which gives me hope for the full launch, because we do have a couple different launch periods. We have early access for everyone who pre-orders, and then the full launch, which are a few days apart. So hopefully it kind of splits up the player base enough that it makes it so that the servers aren't really much of a problem at launch. So hopefully, I'm excited about it. I cannot wait to finally get hands-on with Diablo 4. Waiting a long time. It's a game that I think the hardcore players are going to not be as thrilled about, but it's going to be a widely popular game because it does appeal to the masses a bit more than it appeals to the hardcores. Now, there's a time commitment for sure, but the gameplay loop, the way it kind of plays out, ultimately, I think is appealing to a wider audience. And so it's not going to be Path of Exile. It's not going to be Black Desert Online. Some of these more hardcore games, and people have to keep that in mind as they're playing it, because I think there's going to be a disconnect between the top end players saying that the game might be too easy or might not have the complexity they would want, versus the more your average player, who I think is going to be very excited about the gameplay loop, the accessibility, and the way everything is going to shake out. So that's very fascinating for me, and I'm really excited to see how that all kind of balances over the course of time. Now, jumping into Destiny, we did have more reveals for Season of the Deep. There are massive changes to the sandbox coming, from weapons, exotic armors, subclass tuning. All of that is coming, which is very exciting. We've got new weapons, new exotics also as well, and some Lightfall story, as well as Season of the Deep story, where we're going to Titan. We're going to revisit Sloane, one of the characters that I absolutely love and definitely miss in Destiny. So it's very exciting. I think this season, as a standalone season, is going to be better than Season of Defiance. Just a prediction there, but that's my personal feeling on the matter. I think it's going to be a better standalone season, and we're really going to start ramping up, because you got to remember, we've got Season of the Deep, Season 22, and then Season 23 before we do have the final shape. And the final shape is going to be everything. So I think we're just going to get more and more intense as the seasons go by. So Season of the Deep is that kind of kickoff point. Even though Season of Defiance kind of was, I think Season of the Deep is where things start to get really real. Now, there were pictures of us being underwater. They had a little teaser trailer where we were underwater. So that's going to be interesting, because I don't know if there's going to be like an underwater level. Sometimes those kind of suck, and not everyone loves them. But if there is one, I hope there's not too many penalties for fighting underwater or anything like that. A little trip under there could be cool, and it could provide a different gameplay loop, which would be exciting. We don't know anything yet about the seasonal activity, the story, or anything like that. Again, we do know that more Lightfall story is coming. We have another Lightfall exotic coming, and we have the seasonal exotics for Season of the Deep as well. So all that being said, I'm very, very hyped about this season. I think the potential for it is very, very high, and I'm looking forward. 1 week from tomorrow, we are going to get hands-on with it and absolutely be able to see for ourselves how it works out. Plus, as a build crafter, I see a lot of room for building out different theory crafting and having a lot more viability after some of the buffs and nerfs that we've seen. I made whole videos on that, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, overall, very excited about that. Now, before I go any farther, make sure you leave a rating no matter what platform you're watching or listening to this on. Like it on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. leave a review on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. All that stuff helps me out tremendously. I'd love to rise up the ranks and get more people to listen in. So I would really appreciate it. Love you guys' faces. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is kind of speculation on when some of these other games are going to launch. So we know Synced is coming in August. And so we know as well that Wayfinder is having another beta at the end of May, and then that one is coming with a full release in the summer, it said. But I think that's going to be, again, August as well. So August is going to be pretty slam packed. We don't know for sure about Wayfinder. We don't have a date, but I would imagine either August. I mean, that's the end of the summer, so that's probably when it's going to fall in. That's going to go into early access, and then the full launch will be later on in the year or the following year. But early access is going to be essentially the full game. So that's going to be exciting. I'm very hyped about Wayfinder. I think it's got a ton of potential. Then we get into the First Descendant, which is kind of, they've been teasing things on Twitter, but it's kind of gone radio silent. Ultimately, I think the First Descendant is going to launch in December or even pushed out into February of next year. The reason being, I think that's a game that after the beta, compared to Synced, had a bit more issues, and there were some more things for them to sort out. Now, they did have a wide variety of things ready for us to play during the beta. It just felt like because it's a PvE focused game, they're going to need way more content in order to keep people satisfied. You have all these classes. Again, it's kind of like Warframe in that you unlock these characters and then all the characters have their own abilities, but you're going to switch between the characters, which have their own unique play styles. You're not going to really, you have to unlock the characters as well over the course of time. So you're not really going to be able to just level them up separately like you might see like in Destiny, where you just pick one of your 3 classes and that's your character. No, you're going to change your characters as the game goes on and pick whichever one you want to use for a certain situation. So I'm excited about the First Descendant. I think that's a game that potentially I found more interesting than Warframe personally. I know that's going to be potentially a hot take after the beta, but I think there's a lot of potential for that game. It's fast. It plays fast. Lots of cool abilities, so that could be cool. But I think we're still a ways away from that launching. Same thing with Arc Raiders. So Arc Raiders is one that was teased as well quite some time ago, and then it's gone almost dead silent, which is either news that like we're still a ways away, even though they did say a 2023 launch, just like the First Descendant. But I think that one actually could be the opposite, where instead of a radio silence meaning we're ways away, I'm pretty sure we're going to see just a out of nowhere launch where this thing is either ready to go or in early access or something. And I feel like that's going to happen around October. Now, October is a busy time for games, so it might not be the best time for them, but I would imagine if they're going to drop it, I mean, it could be September. September, I think, would be the perfect time for me personally. But we'll see. I mean, that's going to be something that we'll have to wait and see. I think we're going to see them staggered. So Synced in August, then maybe we'll see another one of them in September, and then another one either December or January, sometime like that. We do also have the day before, supposedly launching in November. I've made a ton of videos on that because that one just does not feel like it's going to be what it's been promised, and it kind of was a little underwhelming as we were looking at it. Not what I thought it was going to be as an MMO. And so for that reason, I think that one I'm not really counting at this point. But those are the major ones on the horizon. There's other ones that have been teased and are potentially there, but those are the games that have been previously discussed for a 2023 launch. And I don't think all of them are going to hit it. I think we're going to see at least one, maybe multiple of those games pushed back. But I'm hopeful. I think the potential, like I said, for the rest of this year to be absolutely insane. We also know that there's other ARPGs coming. There was a ARPG announced for, I believe, Pathfinder, which sounds like it could be really cool. And so there's a lot of potential, like Diablo style games, again, that appeal to the masses. And Path of Exile 2 is still on the horizon, but that looks to be a 2025 or something like that release date, which is kind of crazy that it was talked about so long ago and it's so far away still. But that's a game that I believe they would want to really innovate on and push forward and make it a completely new feeling game that's just Path of Exile times 10 way better. My dog agrees. She wants to play Path of Exile as well. So anyway, that's pretty much it for today. A little bit shorter of an episode, but again, next week I'm gonna have loads of information with regards to other games. We'll probably have the full tease for Season of the Deep. We'll have more videos and information coming out about Diablo 4. We might even see this summer. Like, I know we have Summer Games Fest coming up, so we'll probably see some more release dates and maybe some surprise announcements for some looters as well, which is, again, very exciting times. That's why I started the podcast when I did. I think the future is very bright for the genre. I know it's a wide mix of games from looter shooters to top-down ARPG looters, but I think all of them come to the same space where you want to get your gear, level up, build out your characters, and create these awesome builds and nuke the world and have fun with that. So anyway, my name is JoPa. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, again, a rating, a like, a subscribe, all that stuff means the world to me. I appreciate each and every one of your faces. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.